Sounds good.
Hello, welcome to the Yake Show. My name is Tiade, and joining us today is Professor Ubaka Ogbogu. He's an associate professor in the faculties of law and pharmacy and pharmaceutical sciences, and the Cairns Research Fellow in Health Law and Science Policy at the University of Alberta. He joins us to talk about Bill 30 and police brutality in Edmonton. Good afternoon, Professor. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me, and good afternoon to everyone.
Yes, sir. Just saying both your faculties is like decades of learning. It was a mouthful. They even had practice, reading that over and over and over again. I couldn't even say it right. So how long did it take you to get to where you are, sir?
Well, I got a law degree from Nigeria in 1997, and I finished a PhD in law in 2014. So that's over 20 years, maybe. It takes a long time, yeah. Yeah, it's a very long academic journey.
Yeah, and then law and pharmaceutical sciences. Did you have to do anything pharmaceutically related to be able to do that? Because that's a different path.
Yeah, no, it's entirely by accident. So the area of law that I work in is called health law. I am a lawyer by training. All my degrees are in law. But when you work in health law, it is traditional for law professors who work in health law to be cross-appointed to a different faculty. And so the cross-appointment is a factor of the fact that I'm a health law professor. And my cross-appointment is to pharmacy. Some other health law professors have a cross-appointment to public health or to medicine. And law is my primary faculty. I just teach some health law courses in pharmacy. It's just an arrangement that works so I can teach in pharmacy because of the area that I work in, but I have no training. I'm not a pharmacist. I have no training in pharmacy.
Okay, and health law is a broad field, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a field where you look at how law impacts healthcare and health. So how you use law as a tool to regulate and manage healthcare. So it's really broad. It's everything to do with health, and then how you use law as a tool to assess and reflect on health and developments in health.
I mean, I didn't have nightmares about this conversation, but I had, my goodness, talking to a law professor would be so brilliant. How am I going to do this? Where do I run to? What am I getting myself into? But again, thank you, sir, for taking the time. Now, you recently resigned from the Health Quality Council of Alberta. Why did you do this, sir?
Well, so when I was appointed to the council, the authority under which the council acted was very different from what it is now under Bill 30, which is the new legislation that the government of Alberta just passed, which amends that legislation amends a variety of health-related statutes, including the statute or legislation that sets up the Health Quality Council of Alberta. When I was appointed back in 2017, I believe, or 2018, the Health Quality Council of Alberta operated as an independent organization that's at arm's length from government. And what that means is that it is set up so that it's not influenced by government. So it doesn't matter what political parties in power, its work remains essentially the same. And that work was to measure and monitor certain aspects of our healthcare system, including mainly patient safety and the quality of the healthcare that we receive. So if you're somebody who's looking at healthcare quality and patient safety, it's important that you stay independent from government so that if you find out something, because our system is mostly a public system, if you find out something that the government would like, then the government doesn't stop you from releasing it because it's for the benefit of Albertans. So that was the original arrangement under the statute when I was appointed. With Bill 30, much of that has been taken away. So the organization has lost a lot of its independence now. It is now essentially under the minister's office, under the Office of Minister of Health. And this is not a good thing, because if the Minister of Health controls what the organization does, then that independence and objectivity that the organization has is lost. Now, the Health Quality Council of Alberta is really unique among health quality councils around the world. And much of its uniqueness comes from this independence and its ability to work without government interference. So if you take that away, you've really taken away its biggest strength. And that was something I just wasn't comfortable with. And I guess the lesson there is, if you sign up for one thing and that thing is fundamentally altered, it's not a small change. To me, it's a significant change. And if it's that, then you don't have to stay. So I decided to resign.
Okay, I've got two questions, sir. So for those who do not know, could you explain briefly what Bill 30 is? And do you feel like the lone voice with your departure from the HQCA, as in the board didn't do anything, was just you resigned? They've not really altered their own position. They are still waiting for, they weren't consulted as well, but they're happy with it. Do you feel alone with this resignation as a lone voice calling out this government?
So no, I will take the second question first before I explain Bill 30. No, not at all. Let me be very clear that my resignation is a very personal decision that is based on how I view these matters and how I tend to approach things. But it's not to say that it makes me special or a hero by resigning. People who stay on the board are also equally brave, because you have to keep in mind that this is an organization that people really care for and believe in. And to be on the board of the organization means that you're committed to the work of the organization. It's not just easy to up and quit. And people can actually bring about change from the inside. So I prefer to look at it as a two-pronged strategy.
All right.
I wanted to stay, but I resigned in part because I thought it was a fundamental change, but also because I wanted to highlight the change for Albertans. So that's the more important thing. I wanted to go public so Albertans will know what was going on with their healthcare system and what the government was doing. If I stayed, that wouldn't, I don't think, make me, inferior in any way. I don't think people who stayed are doing anything bad, because they can actually work to continue the organization's objectives. This is an organization that employs people, that cares about the work it does. So you need some people on the inside to also help it recover from Bill 30, to help it maintain its status and do its work. And so I see it as a two-pronged thing, and these two prongs are equally important. I don't see myself as a hero or as doing something special. It's just how I chose to approach a common problem that me and my colleagues had, and they are approaching it from a different perspective. Now, what does Bill 30 do? So our healthcare system in Canada and in Alberta is largely a public system. What does this mean? It means that it operates in two ways. The first is, what makes it public? The first is, many of the services that we receive within the healthcare system as Albertans is covered by a system of public insurance, which means the government pays for those services. So that's why, many of us will go to the hospital. We don't have to pay for services. Now, this is really important because that's what distinguishes our system from one where you have to pay a lot of money to private providers where you have to pay out of pocket, and paying out of pocket can be very expensive, as we've seen in the US example. So it's a publicly insured system. The government pays for most services you receive. There are some services that you get that you pay for out of pocket, like ambulance services, like the dentist. But most of the services we actually enjoy in the healthcare system are covered by the government. This means that your ability to pay does not affect you being able to get services. Whether you're poor or you're rich, because the government pays for it, your ability to pay is not a factor for these services. The second element of it is how the services are delivered. Most of the services we receive, again, are delivered within a public system of delivery, which means the hospitals are owned by the public system, by the government. So, for example, if you go to the Royal Alexandra Hospital in Edmonton, it's a public system, and there's a lot of benefits with having public delivery as well. Because when you go to those hospitals, profit is not the primary incentive for them to operate. If it's a private company giving you healthcare, what they want to do is maximize shareholder value. They work for their shareholders, so they can charge you a lot of money for these services. But because it's being delivered in a public system, we try to keep the cost low. It doesn't matter what brings you into the system. We try to take care of you, and it's more beneficial that way. Bill 30 changes a variety of legislation that kind of attack these two concepts in different ways.
All right.
The first way that it does, the main way that it does this, is to say some of the services that are being provided within the public system now, that are being delivered publicly, will now be delivered in a private system by private companies. Right. So this will include surgical services. So the government plans for at least 30% of surgeries to be performed in a private system. And that has many implications. But also, things like when you get into the private system, it is now possible for those companies to sell you something called enhanced services. So in addition to getting those basic things that you're supposed to get, they can sell you additional services, which might make care become more expensive if you feel pressured to accept those services. The bill also makes changes that allows corporations to get involved in providing healthcare services. And when corporations get involved, you have private delivery, and that can come with a lot of baggage. And the government will now pay these corporations to provide these services. Now, one effect that might have is that these corporations will start to do only what we call the least complex cases. So they will take cases like surgeries that are not very complex, like day surgeries, and they'll do a lot of them and get paid by the government for doing that, while the public system will be left with the complex surgeries. And that can create a serious backlog of complex surgeries in the public system, while the private system is doing all the easy stuff. So this has a lot of implications for the healthcare we're going to receive. And some of us feel that this is moving us very close to the American system. So if your viewers have heard about the American system, this is one step in that direction. Bill 30 is a big bill. It's called an omnibus bill. It does a lot. I can't cover it even in 1 hour. It does a lot of things, but this is one of the major pieces. And just very quickly, the other thing that it does is it attacks the independence and expertise of certain healthcare institutions in Alberta, like the colleges, professional colleges, so like the College of Physicians and Surgeons. It increases the number of public members on the board of the CPSA of the college. This is a good thing, actually, because you want more public members to be involved in governance, right? When organizations regulate themselves, they can act out of conflict, out of their own interest, and that creates a conflict with public interests. So you actually want more public members on these boards. The problem is that this government has a habit of appointing people who are not qualified, but who they like, who support them, and who have donated to their campaigns. So they are big fans of cronyism. They appoint their cronies to this board. So public members might end up being their cronies, and these public members will then not provide the level of oversight. They will just be acting as government agents within these organizations. So in short, Bill 30 is not a good thing, in my opinion.
I mean, I want to examine Bill 30 a bit closely, but I've got a question here about the Jason Kenney government and what you just mentioned as cronyism. Listening to you, it appears you are on the left side of this government. So is this a partisan thing? Because you don't agree with this, and I know there've been other instances since this government has started. You've also been against. So is this a partisan issue where you are on the left of this? of this government?
No, that's not how I approached it. So I am not a member of the NDP. I have, like every other Canadian, my political beliefs and how I vote. But I will consider myself to be somebody who votes on issues, not along party. I actually hate two-party politics. I am not a big fan of party politics. It's political parties can be cults in a way. It doesn't matter whether you agree or disagree with them on issues. You have to follow what they say. So I don't see myself getting involved in politics for that reason.
Very partisan right now. It seems to me like it's UCP or NDP. It seems also to me that if you don't support this government, you are leaning towards the NDP.
No, I think that's the wrong way to look at it. I mean, some people are like that. I don't deny that, but that's not me. I just don't like two-party politics. I consider myself I wouldn't even call myself an independent. I'm somebody who's an issues voter. I have my life philosophies, and my life philosophies basically come down to anytime you're making policy in government, think about the people on the margins. I believe that every government should care for people who don't have, and always start to think about people who don't have. I mean, my background, I grew up in Nigeria in a small village, and to be honest, if the government did not care for me, and you're from Nigeria as well, I'm only here today to the extent that the government cared about my welfare. And Nigeria, with all its problems, we still have some things that the government did for us. Like I went to all through university and law school. It was free education. Imagine if that didn't exist, I wouldn't be here today. So why would I get into government and try to kill the educational system? Education is the only reason I am sitting here today talking to you. And that education, my education up until PhD, was basically free. I've only spent about $3,000 on tuition in my entire life up to a PhD. So why would I support a government or any policy that does not provide that for people? How does a poor person, a person without means, ever become like me, become educated? Now I live in a big house. I can eat 3 times a day. That's what I believe. So I don't care which party promotes this. That's the party I'm going to vote for, right? So it's not a partisan issue. I'm somebody who votes by issues. If you have a government that is against immigration, why would I support them? Immigration brought me here, right? That's how I vote. So it's not partisan. But it's a good question you've asked. Why is it a good question? Because people tend to think it's partisan. It's not. When the NDP was in power, I criticized them as well. I criticized them on issues. That's the key, on issues. This government is a much more frustrating government to deal with. When I criticize the NDP will, they will either ignore me, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes they'll actually listen. This government doesn't listen.
On what counts did you criticize the NDP, for example?
Various. NDP government failed to establish a good policy for vaccination.
Right. Okay.
In 2014, we had a measles outbreak in Alberta.
Right.
And I believe, there's vaccination available for measles, and we shouldn't be having measles outbreaks. And so I advocate for mandatory vaccination. The NDP government did not have a policy for vaccination. They didn't even have one. Their policy was, we're going to wait for the disease to come, and then we're going to deal with it, which to me is no policy. I was on radio, I was on TV criticizing this. The NDP government supported a policy whereby for medical assistance in dying, if you were sent to a Catholic hospital, to a faith-based hospital in the city, in the province, you couldn't receive the service without inconvenience. I criticized this. I wrote op-eds. I was on TV. So it's ridiculous for people to suggest that this is partisan based. It's not. I'm not a partisan operator. I don't belong to any political party. I'm just somebody who has expertise and who cares deeply about issues. And I've attacked this government on issues. What I just told you about Bill 30 is not a partisan issue. No. It is not. It's a people of Alberta issue. Very soon, your healthcare is going to be more expensive, and you're going to have less access to it. How is that partisan?
Well, the thing is, many of us don't know that now, do we? When it happens like 6 months down the line. And it seems to me this government, though, has stepped on so many people's toes, medical doctors, teachers, teaching assistants. and so on and so forth. And the question I have right here is, how would you, one of the things you said is this government caring for people who do not have? My question is, if you were to rate this government right now out of 10, how would you rate them?
So generally, conservative governments are not, they don't operate for the benefit of the grassroots
All right.
of our citizens. It's everyone knows this. Anyone who studies conservative governments or who has lived through them knows this. They believe in something called trickle down policies. So the idea is the best way to care or to provide for society is to provide for corporations,
All right.
right? And then corporations will provide for people. So it's not a government that provides directly for people. So, for example, they will say, let's provide for the oil and gas industry. And then when the oil and gas industry employs people, those people will then have good lives. So all their ideas are about enable people who are rich so that people who are rich will trickle it down. They'll trickle it down to people who don't have. So in that kind of government, the only benefits you get are benefits that come through employment. That is why in Canada today, many of the benefits you receive as a human being come through employment. I believe that's not my philosophy of government. My philosophy of government is that every society should have a government that provides for some basic goods that everyone has, regardless of employment, regardless of whether you have a job or not. Everyone should have those basic goods. What are my basic goods? Education, healthcare, housing, transportation. These are all basic goods. Everyone should be able to have some of these things I call basic goods without having to, go to great lengths to get it. And so as a society, how do we achieve that? I think what we should do is find ways to raise revenue to provide these basic goods so that people are not left behind because they're not able to participate in employment. So this government is basically destroying all the basic institutions I'm talking about, basic goods. For education, what they're trying to do is destroy the public system, which is free, and shift people to a private system where you have to pay to get your kids educated.
Yeah.
I don't support that. They want to shift healthcare from a public system, which I just told you about, to a private system where you have to pay more. So we're going to be like America. I don't support that. On housing, they're not providing housing for people who don't have houses. And, I don't know how long you've lived in this country. Getting a house in this country is extremely difficult.
Yeah.
I pay about $2,500 every month in mortgage. That's a lot of money to pay for a mortgage. There are people who can afford that. It doesn't matter what you say, they just can afford it. But do people deserve, in a place like this that's very cold, to be left outside, to be homeless? No, I don't think so. Am I happy to pay more in taxes since I make more money so that these people can have housing? Yes, I'm willing to, right? So I think that's the sort of fundamental issue that people have with this government, is that it's not a government that directly cares for citizens. Instead, it wants citizens to sort of, basically open your mouth so that like the benefit of society can trickle down into your mouth from corporations. And I don't agree with that.
I mean, what I don't know much about, socialism, but it sounds to me like your views are people oriented, and some people call that socialism or socialist views, less welfareism, let's look after. And I feel kind of comfortable with that right now, actually. Who am I to defy anything you say? But
no. So like on that, I'm not a big fan again of terminology. I don't care what people call it, really, whether you call it socialism or whatever. The basic point is this. So let me again trace this back to my roots. I am from a small village in Nigeria. I didn't grow up with running water. I didn't have electricity for most of my, life growing up. We didn't have 3 meals a day sometimes. My parents were both teachers. They were both educated, but we still couldn't afford, some basic necessities of life. It was a tough existence growing up. My parents basically gave up everything so that we can have a life, right? And we were lucky. We're lucky. We actually managed to get an education up to university. There are many people I left behind in Nigeria who are still struggling today. because our society in Nigeria cannot provide some basic goods for its citizens. I don't care what you call it. I just think no one should suffer.
Yeah.
That, I mean, how difficult is that as a concept?
Well, I'm with you, utilitarianism, social welfareism. I hear you, and I'm with you because you are the elite. You are the professor. You have a house. Some of us are renting, or we still live in our
Right.
homes. You know, we can't afford.
Right.
We can't afford. But that's besides the point. I see what you're saying, though. Most of us should be able to aspire. But then again, when you think about this government, they won land. They won the election fair and square. This
Mm-hmm.
province was blue. It was deeply blue. So people,
Mm-hmm.
when they voted for them, knew they wanted conservatism. They were
Mm-hmm.
done with the NDP, and this is what you get when you vote for conservative values. Um,
No, I wouldn't. Let me sort of jump in. I wouldn't blame people for this. Look, elections, two-party elections are funny. I encourage your viewers to actually. There's an episode of a show by Hassan Minhaj on Netflix, where he talks about how elections work in North America. Look, when you go out there to vote, the notion that your vote matters in the way you think it matters has been challenged a lot. So let me sort of try and explain this in a way that's not too complex.
all right.
In a two-party system, right? You don't really have, it's winner takes it all, winner takes all, right?
Yeah.
And it's basically a count based on numbers. If the person wins by one, they become the government,
That's
right? So when you say Alberta voted blue, many of those votes, right, came from rural communities that have sort of different needs and desires from what people who live in maybe urban areas will want. It's possible to design a system where people vote on issues, right? So that somebody who lives in the rural community doesn't vote in a way that then affects my life in the urban area. And I don't vote in a way that affects their life negatively as well. We can design better voting systems than this winner takes it all. You're right that Alberta voted conservative, right? But the way the election worked out, Edmonton, for example, voted NDP. But Edmonton now has to live under conservative policies. That is not fair. That's because we're voting by party lines, not by issues, right? At the end of the day, if you ask Albertans, what do you want for healthcare? They might give you a different answer than just NDP or UCP. They might tell you, we want to preserve our public healthcare system. And indeed, when this government ran in the elections, they didn't say anything about changing the public healthcare system. But they've done it now. So that's why two-party politics is bad. That's why I don't like it, right? When people voted for Trump in the United States, did the people in the United States really want him prosecuting a race war? Did they want all of these things? We don't know. So two-party politics is dangerous because it means you
won the free vote, though. She won the popular vote, though. But Trump won the electoral college and he's president.
No, that's what I mean. These elections are designed in a way that at the end of the day is winner takes it all. Yeah. And winner takes it all does not produce
it doesn't.
Good policy governance. So I don't find it compelling to say, oh, the UCP won the elections. Yeah, that doesn't mean they can run roughshod over policy. Good governments try to take both sides into account because you're governing both sides.
What the UCP is doing now, do you think?
No, they're not doing that. They're governing only to their own idealism, right? And all they're doing now is going to their own ideology and not considering that they're actually governing all of Alberta. They are not just providing for UCP voters. It's Alberta. That's their jurisdiction, not UCP voters. So that compels them to listen to the other side and try and accommodate the other side and not just say, for the Albertans who didn't vote against us. An election is not a means to punish people who didn't vote for you.
All right.
Right. It's not punishment. I don't have to live now in Alberta for 4 years being punished because I didn't vote for UCP. That's not how it's supposed to work in a democracy.
That's true. Okay, we move on to the next topic. I know our time is fast. Thank you. I think we're doing well. We're having a good conversation here. You described a couple of weeks ago as you criticized the government's task force on police brutality. You said lack of political bravery and you called it hugely disappointing. Why?
Well, the police issue is, I think, one that is very emotional for a lot of us black people and other racialized persons in North America. What is happening in North America is that we have a system of policing here in North America that is designed primarily and mainly to oppress Black people, indigenous people, and racialized minorities. That's the design. If you go into the history of policing in North America, police was basically created to protect the property of, essentially white people and the wealthy class, and take the position that people who are Black, indigenous, and racialized, who usually and historically have been more on the margins of society, that they remain oppressed and on the margins of society. And with the killing of George Floyd in the United States, we've seen, and with various other killings of Black people, that issue has now come to the fore. We've seen police brutality. I mean, anyone now who's denying that police brutality is a thing, maybe has been living under a rock or just likes to deny reality. I don't need to convince your viewers of this. There's police brutality in North America. Again, I grew up in Nigeria, and there is police brutality in Nigeria. And I will say that police brutality in North America is actually worse
Than in Nigeria.
Yeah, I would say so. Why? I mean, there's no good form of police brutality. Why is it worse? Because in growing up in Nigeria, I could actually I could afford to avoid the police. For the most part, I don't have to have contact with them. But what the police do in North America is they police communities that have people like me. That's what they do primarily. So if you go to certain parts of Edmonton where you find more Black people, more indigenous people, the police will patrol the streets looking to get them in trouble. That doesn't happen in Nigeria, right? Where we're predominantly Nigerians.
Yeah, but the problem when I also did my first degree in Nigeria, and I was until recently I realized I was traumatized by an incident where I was leaving my house with a fridge. I was taking it to the university. I went to UI, and we were stopped by the police, and they harassed us for not having a receipt for the fridge that had been my dad's. And that bothered me for a long time.
Yeah, and I'm not saying it happens in Nigeria, right? But it doesn't happen in Nigeria along racial lines.
No.
Police is just brutal in Nigeria, if you will. Here, if you're a white person here, the influence of police on your life is significantly less than the influence of police. What I'm suggesting is that the police over polices Black, indigenous, and racialized communities. They are, if you want to avoid them, you're going to have to move away from your community. Anywhere where you have, Black, indigenous, or racialized persons, you're likely to find police looking to get them in trouble. There's a term for it, right? It's called carding or street checks. Police will do street checks to try and get people into trouble. So because of all that, and this movement where we've seen that has come to be because of the killing of George Floyd in the United States, it's become very clear that this is an opportunity to push the government, especially municipal government, to rethink this model of policing, because the police is given a ton of money to do this. The police budget is huge.
Oh, yeah.
They can afford to buy themselves tanks and behave like they're military. It's huge. So what I'm advocating for is take money away from police that they used to do. They used to harass.
Yeah.
They used to harass communities on the margin, and instead use that money to improve the lives of these communities. Now, think about that for a second. It goes back to what I was telling you about Bill 30 and my view of government. Again, this is not partisan. It's simple. Let me give you an example to sort of drive this point home. Public transit in Edmonton is not free. you have to have $3.25 or something like that to ride public transit. If you don't pay that money, a transit cop, a transit police officer, who is paid a salary to do this, their salary is huge, it's a huge part of the budget, comes in and harasses you for not paying this $3.25. What will happen if the city made transit free? It'll be cheaper to transport Edmontonians than to police them for not paying $3.25. Now, which is better? Many big cities around the world.
Right.
I was in Geneva.
Yeah.
Transit in Geneva is either free or cheap. So cheap.
It's $3.25 expensive. Isn't it per day?
No. Some people don't have $3.25.
Okay.
They don't. The people who get arrested don't have it.
All right.
Right? People who have it tend not to ride the train. They all have cars.
That's true.
People don't, because think about it, it's $3.25 a day. No, $3.25 for about 2 hours. Right? So you want to go to work and come back $7. There are people who don't have that money because they rely on $7 a day to feed themselves in this city, right? But again, my point is, if you take that money from the police budget that you used to pay transit cops, if you take that money, you can provide for free transit in the city.
Right.
So which is better? Do you want to live in a city where police arrests someone and harasses them and throws them in jail for not having $3.25, or one where transit is free? Now, if transit is free, there are many benefits to that. People can get around easily. That is good for the economy. People can get to work without harassment. They'll be happier. They can, decide, oh, I just want to go to the mall. And maybe when they get to the mall, they might buy like ice cream. That is good for the economy. Instead of thinking, is it the mall or is it $3.25 to pay to my fare? So that's the idea behind defund the police. Is the police is not in a position to provide some social services and provide them well. Another example, police is involved in mental health care. So if you're having mental health issues, you might have the police come by, and we've seen incidents where the police has come by and just shot people. Yeah. They're not trained mental health professionals. Yeah. So which is better? Is it better for a city to provide trained people who can deal with mental health situations, to deal with mental health situations, and take that off the police budget? How about police in our schools for our children? Why do we have police in schools? Right? These police in schools over police Black kids and Indigenous kids.
Yeah.
They create a pipeline from school to prison for our kids. Why is that right?
Yeah, but why didn't the council listen? Over 150 people made presentations in June. Why didn't they listen to all these arguments? It does make sense. Shouldn't there be more? Why didn't they listen, sir?
So you can invite counsel and ask them. I don't want to speak for them. It'll be good to invite the mayor to this show and ask the mayor.
If it takes, invited him one time, he didn't come.
Well, I have some theories as to this.
Yeah.
When people have fear for something that is not part of their lives, that fear can sometimes be stronger than reality. Yeah. So many people fear that if you defund police, there's going to be a societal breakdown.
Yeah.
Even though police is not in their lives. Like I live in Crestwood, which is one of the richest neighborhoods.
There you go, sir.
In Alberta, in Edmonton.
Mm-hmm.
In this neighborhood, I have never seen police.
Right.
They don't patrol the streets. They don't.
So why do you know Cardin so intimately then, if you live in a posh neighborhood, sir?
Well, I've been to many Cardin. I'm a Black person in the city. Just because I live here doesn't mean I'm not concerned about what's happening in the city. I go to a lot of events around Cardin. I listen to people who talk about Cardin. Now, how do I come to live here? As a university professor, I'm well paid, right? I won't deny that. When I decided to find a place to live, I'm the only Black person on this street, on my block. It's not a good community for me to be in from the perspective of people like me. But why did I choose to live here? Because this place has good schools. I can afford to live without being harassed by police. So I bought the cheapest house in the neighborhood, and we spent 5 years trying to make it look like a decent place to live, right?
Yeah.
And these are choices you have to make. You take yourself out of your community to go live somewhere where you don't feel necessarily at home, just because you want to avoid police and you want to avoid harassment, right? Many Black people in the city cannot make those choices. And I didn't come here on the day I moved to Edmonton. I lived in neighborhoods where I was renting. We only moved here 2012. I've been in Edmonton since 2002, right?
Yes.
Many Black people can never afford this kind of upward mobility. And when they can't afford it, they are forced to live in communities where they are over-policed. And that's what I'm saying. Raise their lives so that we all can live in communities where we don't have police and where we're free to take our kids out and have them play in parks without being harassed. It shouldn't be just something I enjoy as a privilege.
Yeah.
It should be available to every Black person and every Indigenous person.
Okay, I see what you're saying, Sam. From the UK, where to avoid ghetto behavior or vandalism, you, as a Black woman, I'm also a single mom, I chose to live in a very nice area because it was for safety of me and my kid. I just needed the peace. So I know what you're talking about. But when I came here, the way they explained it to me was Alberta, Edmonton is not like Chicago, where there's downtown where you got the ruffians. There's no train line demarcating size for rich folk and Black folk, but we're all the same. That was the way they explained it.
That's not true. And I don't really consider, so I don't consider people who have to get involved in things with label crimes or offenses as ruffians necessarily. Look, it's easy for me with my privilege to think of them as ruffians, but I have 3 meals a day. I'm sitting in my nice living room. I don't have to worry about my, anything, I can afford most of the things I need. When you don't have that, the choices you have in life become much more difficult, right? And so these people don't become ruffians just because they want to be ruffians. You might have some people in the world who are criminals because they were born criminals. They're psychopaths. Maybe you have them, but most people are down on their luck. And when you're down on your luck and your society is not providing for you, you start to get desperate. Now, look, you might ask, what is he talking about? He's posh and he's privileged. But here's the point. I'm a single individual. If I decide tomorrow with my salary, which is not a lot, I'm talking about like it's still for many people more than what many people receive. But if I take it, I can't make a dent in societal problems. That's why I pay taxes. Where I live, I pay property taxes. I pay my income taxes. And I hope my government uses those taxes, not for me, but for people who can't afford what I have. That is the philosophy I have been preaching since I got on this show. I don't need one more thing in my life, but I can't change society on my own. But if I give to the government should use it for people who can't afford what I can afford. I don't even care if the government wants to raise my taxes a little bit more so they can afford to take care of people who can't get the opportunities I get, right? That's all I'm saying. And when the government is not doing that, then people get desperate. That's when they start to, get involved in things like drug use, and they start to get involved in things like vandalism and all whatnot. And then we call them criminals and we put them in jail. We spend more money to keep them in jail than to take care of them outside of jail. What kind of society is that, right? It's just ridiculous. And when you say to the government, that's not the way to do it. Provide for them. That's what we're saying to City Council. Give them housing. Instead of policing them and sending them to jail, give them housing, right? And I mean, in my head, it's a simple idea. I don't know why it's difficult for government to do that.
Yeah, the politics of it is different. And Catherine is just saying in Winnipeg, there's no transit police here. So is that the problem with Alberta then? Is Alberta this racialized then?
Look, Edmonton, people think Edmonton is like this place where, there's a ton of systemic racism in Edmonton. There are communities in Edmonton where you find largely indigenous and Black people. So, for example, 118 Street, there's more Black shops.
Yeah.
The Black people live in certain places in the city. right? If you go to those places, you're going to find evidence of what I'm talking about,
Yeah.
evidence of the city not caring enough, right? Same with inner city, what is called the inner city in Edmonton. So parts of downtown where you're going to find, more indigenous people living, because they want to live in a community where, they can keep community ties and cultural ties, right? And what you find in those communities is lesser services than you find in places like mine. In my community, every year the city rolls in a truck here and pours asphalt on our streets. There's nothing wrong with the road. They just pave it again, right?
All right.
Because they're trying to appease the rich people who live here.
Mm.
Meanwhile, you go to these neighborhoods where people don't have much. The city doesn't do that same thing for them. You see potholes, you don't see, and there's no street lights, and then they go, oh, these are inner city neighborhoods where people are doing vandalism and robbing. We shouldn't have to make choices to leave our community so as to avoid violence. We should have communities that are violence free. Everyone should be raised up. Now, if that makes me a socialist, sure, I'll embrace the term socialism. I just don't think I can do it alone, which is why I'm adding my voice to urging the government to do it.
So this is why you find it hugely disappointing that they opted for a task force at the end of the day instead of making meaningful change to end systemic racism.
Yeah, a task force is what people who don't want to make any kind of change do. Let's keep talking about it, right?
Right.
Let's keep talking about it. As a Black person, task force and all these things, is draining. The problem is very clear. By the time you get a task force together, what you're saying is you don't have the bravery really to just start to do things. Now, I don't mind a task force, but show some sign that you're actually going to do something different after the task force has said what it's going to say. That vote, why I'm opposing the task force, that vote said, we asked them to defund the police. You know what they did? They said, look, police, we're going to give you some money to increase your budget. This already big budget, we're going to give you some money to increase it over the next 2 years. We're going to pull back some of that money. We're not going to give it to you anymore. Yeah. So how is a council that is not even willing to take any of the money they have going to make any changes after the task force? So I don't think the task force. Look, some other cities have done it differently. We also asked them to end carding or street checks. They didn't do that. Vancouver did.
All right.
Right? So cities can take actions that make you believe that they're going to do something different, not this city.
Okay. Professor, I'm coming to you, because you know a lot. You're a professor of law at the University of Alberta. That counts for a big deal. And this is my question for you. Alberta has been good to you. You've been good to Alberta. And I'm just wondering, with this system, is there something we're missing or not considering? Are we not thinking the way they are thinking? For them not to hear what 150 people said, for them to institute a task force, see what I just said, them versus, are we not seeing this the way the general Caucasian world is seeing it? Are we meant to see this? Are we wrong maybe?
Well, there's a lot in your question, so let me see if I can try and unpack it. So first of all, I don't think there's any us versus them. Let me take that back. So I don't really believe on the notion of us versus them, and them being sort of purposefully trying to hurt us.
All right.
Right? I think there are people on council who mean well, who have the right ideas, but politics is hard.
Okay.
Right? It's easy for me to sit outside and criticize them. And I will criticize them because I want to put pressure on them, but it's hard, right? Because there are people on that council who don't think there's a problem with police because they don't have police in their lives. There are people on council who are fearful that they won't get people to vote for them next time if they support the cause, because they're worried that the people who vote for them like police. The one thing I can say is that there's an us versus them when it comes to how we think about people who have and who don't have in the city. And it just so happens to it just so happens that people who don't have who are marginalized, who are on the margins, tend to also be people who are racialized in the city. And I don't think people who are the people who are white are very as alive to these issues as they should be. That's how systemic racism works. You know, if you can wake up in the morning and go to your work and come back, you might not be thinking about the person who is not able to do that, right? We don't always think about others who are not like us the way we should. So I don't think some people on council will disagree with what I'm saying. They just don't know how to achieve it, or they're not brave enough to achieve it. I also don't think people like me and you are engaged enough.
Right.
Maybe some of us are not engaged because we are actually just trying to survive from day to day.
Oh yeah.
Maybe others of us who can be engaged, who are actually able to be engaged, are not as engaged as should be. That's why I'm trying to change that in my own life, which is to talk about these issues more and do the best I can with the privilege I have as a Black person in the city.
Yeah.
But there are people who have more privilege than me. We have a minister, for example, who's a Black person, who can do more, right?
Are you okay?
He can do more. On this issue, I like to see him do more. I like to see people who are privileged. He can do more. He's the Minister of Municipal Affairs. He can push the police. He can push the cities, the municipalities to do more. I think that's where we come in as Nigerians and as Black people. When we select people to go fight for us, we should really make sure they're going to fight for us. We should make sure that their philosophies and ideologies match what we are. Not just go, trickle down oil and no, their philosophies should match the communities they represent, people who put them there, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's important. People like us who are privileged have to use our privilege for the benefit of our community.
Politics is hard, Professor. Okay, let's begin to tie this up. What do you think about Dr. Stella Emanuel, the doctor from Houston that found a cure to COVID?
A cure for COVID? I haven't heard of this.
You've not seen the viral video. 20 million of us have seen it. And
there's no cure for COVID.
Okay, so you do not agree that she has tested 300?
It's not about agreement. There's just no cure for COVID, as far as I know.
Hydrochloroquine, zinc, and something else.
So let me be as clear as possible as I can be, since you have viewers here.
Yeah.
There is a lot. Actually, this is part of what I study. There's a lot of misinformation and fake things out there about COVID and COVID treatments. As far as I know, as somebody who studies the area and who follows the evidence, as of today, there is no cure or no vaccine for COVID. COVID can be managed. The symptoms can be managed in a hospital.
Yeah.
But there is no treatment or cure or vaccine for COVID as of today. Now, people are free to believe whatever they believe, but science and medicine is not a matter of belief. It's a matter of evidence. And, I'll caution your viewers not to buy into snake oil. It can be dangerous. As somebody who is an expert in studying these things, I can categorically say that there's no treatment. Now, I sympathize with people. We're not living in the era of the internet, right? And people are bombarded with information, and there's a lot of misinformation out there.
Yeah.
I sympathize with that, but unfortunately, as much as we like to believe it. Now, here's one way to think about it. If there was a cure for COVID, why do we still have COVID? We live in a rich nation. If there was a cure, why has the government not bought it? The best way to know if something is actually legitimate is to ask the person who has the most money to buy it, have they bought it? If the government of Canada, or if the government of Alberta, or any government in Canada pays for anything to provide to its people, then that gives you a fairly, somebody who is a public payer, has a ton of money, has bought into something. If the government hasn't, I see Catherine is saying because we're denied by our government. I just don't think I can convince anyone who believes it. But I'm just saying buyers beware. That's all I can say. I don't want to argue with anyone. As of today, there's no cure for COVID. There's no vaccine for COVID.
I needed to ask you because she said a mixture of hydroxychloroquine and zinc.
No, that's please do not use hydroxychloroquine or zinc, and do not self-medicate when it comes to COVID. Again, Catherine, I'm seeing what you're saying here. I don't really, I can't convince you. So you do what you want to do, but I'm speaking for the benefit of people who are not Catherine. That has been disproved. I can, if you want, you can email me and I can send you, the evidence.
Yeah.
But there's just no, I don't want to belabor the point. There's no cure for COVID. There's no vaccine for COVID.
Okay. Sir, we've had you a lot longer. I've just got to ask you this. As someone who's paid their dues to this system, you're in the system, you are an academician, you're a professor at the University of Alberta, you are a Kant Research Fellow. Sir, your CV is brilliant. What can people like us do, new immigrants, what can we do to do well in this Edmonton that we have chosen to call home? Can you speak to the majority of us who are looking to maybe lay down some footprints in this city? What do we need to do?
So, we all need to sort of work to our strengths. I don't think any of this actually makes me more special than the person who, has a different skill set that I don't have. So I think the biggest thing is to believe in yourself and, work on your skill set to the best of your ability. And anything you think you can do, I think it's good to sort of focus on doing that. When I arrived here as an immigrant in 2002, I came with a backpack, but I had a ton of belief. It's actually, one of the things if I have any strength, is the strength of my convictions and my beliefs. When I arrived here, I stayed in a hostel off White Ave, and I told myself, here's what I want to achieve, and I'm just going to go about achieving it, right? At times it was difficult, there's way the system works against you, but if you have belief and you focus on, just working hard towards it, you eventually get where you're going. It took me, from the time I arrived in 2002, it took me 11 years to finish my academic, 11 years. It's a long time. And in that time, there are times when you ask yourself, do I have, one more year to give to this? But you just keep pushing on. And I think another thing that you can do is the challenge with us immigrants is that we have two lives, really. We live here, but we live back home as well, right? And that can be difficult. And many of us have pressures from back home. Many of us have to work to send money back home. We have to, go back home so we can maintain some kind of community with people who are living behind. For many of us, it comes down to not even, we don't adjust to the food here. We, want our food. These are all great things. But I think there's a good, what has worked for me is finding balance, right? You cannot give too much weight to one or the other. You have to find a way to balance your life here with your life back home. And you have to find a balance that allows you to move forward with your life and not put yourself in a place that you then get stuck and you're living in two worlds, right? And you're not enjoying any of those worlds. So I'll say balance, belief, and hard work. But also, you need the system to support you. Some of us don't have the means to do what I did. I came with a law degree, a very good law degree. I came with scholarships. It's been easy for me in a lot of ways. It'd be nice if when people arrive here, the system supports them. It'd be nice if you don't have a house or you don't have rent, somebody gives you the means to achieve that. I've been lucky to be able to find this at every stage of the way, but there are people who will never have that, which is why I was saying the system needs to support them as well. If, as an immigrant here, you have free transportation, affordable housing, a means to upgrade your courses, somebody telling you you're from Nigeria, you don't speak English, go take some English course before you can work. If they make the process of moving qualifications or training easier for immigrants because to contribute to the economy, that'll make life a lot easier for us. That is why I want those of us who actually manage to make it there to power, to advocate for these things. Advocate for things that make our lives easier here so we can get ahead, right? As much as you see me as a professor who has achieved much, the system helped me get there. Like I said before, I have not paid tuition in this country. That is huge. I got a master's degree and I got a PhD and I didn't pay tuition. Think about that for a second. And when I was doing my PhD, I won a scholarship for $130,000 tax-free. Think about that for a second. I had my first child. We had our first child during my PhD and we're able to survive. Think about that for a second. That is the system helping me become who I am today, right? So you might think of me, this is not about being smart. I can be the smartest person. I'm not the smartest person I know. But even if I was, if the system did not help me, if I didn't have free healthcare, if I didn't have the means to feed myself and my family from taxpayer money, I wouldn't be where I am today. So it's not about how smart I am. It's about how the system has helped me. And so I think it doesn't matter whether, as a Nigerian, as an immigrant, you have belief, you have the means to work hard, you have conviction, you still need the system to contribute. So it's all of that makes a person like me, not, you being the smartest person in the world.
Oh, thank you so much, Professor Ogbogu. What an amazing interview that was. Like, to be honest, I didn't know what to expect. Usually when I have a big interview like this, I have, I just have internal discomfort, but God has been seeing me through this one. I think it wasn't bad after. It was really good. I want to say thank you so much for your time. Thanks for
My pleasure.
Thanks for taking all the questions. Thank you, Catherine Lynn Fox, for your comments. Hope you like and share our video, Catherine, and everybody else watching. Sir, please stay on. I'm going to do a commercial and then I'll end the show.
Okay, sure.
Our viewers, thank you again for watching. This has been The Egg Show with T.